The tree stood alone, its bark cracked, its roots clawing deep into the dry earth. The village it once sheltered had abandoned it, forgotten the very giant that had given them shade, food, and life. But nature never forgets. And when the sky finally turned cruel and the drought swallowed everything, the villagers would return to the old Baobab, too late to undo the years of neglect. This is the story of a forgotten tree, a lost village, and the lesson they almost learned too late. Never neglect your roots. The tree had always been there. It rose from the earth like an ancient guardian, its vast trunk wide enough to house entire families, its branches stretching high as though reaching for forgotten heavens. Even in the dry winds of summer, even when storms bent the grasses flat, the Baobab stood. Its presence was so old, so constant, that the people no longer looked at it with awe. And yet, on this morning, the Baobab looked different. Its bark was cracked deeper than ever before, its leaves scattered in the dirt like shed memories. Children walked past without stopping. Elders no longer whispered prayers at its roots. Traders and hunters ignored it, eyes fixed on the markets and the path to other villages. It was as if the village itself had conspired to forget. But forgetting has a price. The Baobab remembered. Its roots had once carried water when the wells ran dry. Its fruit had fed crying infants when no harvest came. Its hollow trunk had hidden families during storms. For centuries, it had been a quiet protector. Yet now, as the earth grew hotter and the air thinner, the villagers who had once bowed their heads in gratitude walked past it without thought, believing its gifts would always be waiting. But not all of them had forgotten. Among the villagers was a man named Abioye. His body bore the scars of battles long past, though his war had not been fought with swords. His was the war of survival, of holding his family together through years of famine, of burying loved ones lost too soon. He carried himself with quiet dignity, but his silence was often mistaken for weakness. He remembered the Baobab. As a child, he had pressed his ear against its bark and heard the rush of life inside. When his mother fell ill, it was the pulp of the Baobab fruit that had nursed her back to strength. When he had no roof, its shade had been his shelter. To him, the tree was not simply wood and leaves. It was memory itself. But memory, like roots, only matters if tended. The elders of the village began speaking of abandoning the old ways. They said the Baobab is just a tree, they said. Our future lies in trade, in roads, in the cities beyond the hills. The younger villagers cheered, eager to leave behind what they called superstitions. They mocked those who still left small offerings at the tree's base. And when Abioye placed a jug of water at its roots one evening, a group of youths laughed. "Why waste water on a dead tree?" one said. Abioye did not answer. His silence was not weakness, it was honor. Yet each laugh, each insult pressed into him like a thorn. He knew something they did not. The skies had changed. The winds carried dust more than rain. The wells were drying, the fields cracking. He could smell the earth's thirst in the mornings, a metallic dryness that clung to the back of his throat. The Baobab, ancient and vast, was still pulling water from deep beneath the earth. It was a hidden reservoir, a last lifeline. But only those who still remembered looked closely enough to see the small signs, the faint green in its highest branches, the moisture in its bark. The village was blind. When the drought finally arrived, it came without mercy. The rivers shrank to threads of mud. The crops failed. Children cried at night for water, and mothers' arms grew thin from hunger. The same youths who once mocked Abioye now lined the wells with cracked lips and hollow eyes, only to find nothing at the bottom but dust. Panic spread like fire. Families began fleeing, carrying what little they had. Traders no longer came. The roads turned into paths of exile. And still the Baobab stood, silent, immense, unyielding. One morning, when the desperation became unbearable, the villagers gathered in the square. Their leader, once proud and confident, now looked broken. He raised his voice and asked if anyone knew what could save them. Whispers rose, names of distant rivers, of towns beyond the horizon. But no one spoke of the tree, except Abiyoye. He stepped forward, his voice quiet but steady. "The Baobab has not left us," he said. "Its roots drink deeper than ours. It can still give us water, still give us fruit. But we forgot. We neglected it. And now we beg while it still stands waiting." For a moment, silence fell. The people looked at him as if he had spoken madness. Then came the murmurs. "An old man's tale? Superstition. The tree cannot save us." But desperation breaks pride. That night, when children's cries rose like haunting songs, a group of mothers carried their empty jugs to the Baobab. They pressed them against its hollow base, and to their shock, droplets of cool water began to gather, seeping from within. Not much, but enough to wet their lips, enough to promise life. Word spread by dawn. The forgotten tree was not dead. Crowds gathered, filling the clearing around its massive roots. They touched its trunk, wept against its bark. They drank from the slow but steady water it offered, gathered its fruit, and for the first time in months, felt hope. But Abiyoye did not smile, for he knew the tree had given, but it had also been wounded by neglect. Its roots could not be drained endlessly. To take without care would kill it, and if the Baobab fell, the village's last chance would fall with it. And so he spoke again. "We must care for the tree as it has cared for us. We must guard it, water it, honor it. If we forget again, there will be no second chance. Never neglect your roots, whether they are trees, traditions, or the people who stood for us when no one else did." The villagers, humbled, bowed their heads. Some wept openly, and in that silence, a new respect was born, not only for the Baobab, but for the quiet man whose warnings they had once mocked. From that day on, the Baobab became sacred again, not as a superstition, but as a living reminder. Life endures only when gratitude endures with it.